Yes, we're going live.
You should have like your names or something.
All right, welcome everybody to our virtual town hall. We are just kicking this off, so we're going to let people go ahead and have a chance to join before we really get things started. If you have not joined one of these before, again, my name is Peter Crosby. I'm the Democratic nominee for Congress. I am here in northern Utah, which is also CD2, which covers Davis County, Weber County, Box Elder County, Cache County, and Rich counties. So one of the things that we focus on in our campaign, and something that I'm personally very, very passionate about, is that good representation requires a two-way conversation. No public servant can really be a good representative for the people they're hoping to serve unless they make themselves available and listen to the challenges and concerns that people have. And so these virtual town halls are a way for us to do that. We also hold in-person town halls every month in every county across the district, except for Rich County, which is pretty far up north, and we're still trying to make sure that we can get up there, hopefully in this next month or so. But tonight, really what we're going to do is I'm going to answer questions that you might have. First, we're going to talk a little bit about some current events, things that are top of mind for some folks. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about Stratos Data Center and some updates that we have received on that, as well as some things that are happening in that space. We might talk a little bit about current ongoing health crises with the Ebola virus. And really, honestly, like I said, I'm just here to answer your questions and to talk about the things that you're concerned about. So without any further ado, I guess we'll go ahead and kind of kick off with the data center. So for those of you who might not be familiar, Box Elder County, which is in, again, our district and is in my backyard, it's just over Sardine Canyon for me because I live up here in Cache County, has been selected by a state agency known as MIDA to be the home of the world's largest data center, sometimes referred to as a hyperscaler facility. Kevin O'Leary, a Canadian businessman, has decided to partner with the state of Utah and go ahead and build a facility which would use more energy than the entire state currently provides by more than half, by more than double, as well as create some serious concern around water usage and environmental pollution concerns, raising the ambient temperature of the area. There's just a lot of concerns associated with it. The whole saga, again, if you haven't been following along, really kind of what happened is Kevin O'Leary and his foreign corporation reached out to MIDA, which is staffed by appointees that Governor Cox put in place, and then Stuart Adams and Mike Schultz put in place from the legislature. And those board members went ahead and approved this data center facility before any sort of impact studies had been done. And then they went to Box Elder County commissioners and told them, hey, listen, you guys are going to approve this thing that we want to do. And the Box Elder County commissioners, when they first received that information, they held a vote, and about 80 or 90 people showed up. And the vote was to go ahead not to approve or deny the request, but instead to go ahead and take at least another week to go ahead and collect information and public feedback, because no public feedback had been collected up to this point. There was a vote held a week later, which was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, and that was up in Tremonton. At that particular vote, or county commissioner meeting, there were well over 500 people in attendance. I had an opportunity to share some remarks, some concerns that we generally had as members of this community about good governance, about public input, about the impacts of a data center that we didn't know, about the fact that MIDA had given this foreign corporation a sweetheart tax deal. It was a 92% tax break, which is still in place on energy taxes, and an 80% tax break on property taxes. So they were taking money out of our communities in order to allow this foreign corporation to improve its profit margin. There had been
When
over...
you say foreign corporation, when you say foreign corporation, where were they coming from?
So Kevin O'Leary is a Canadian citizen, which means if it's a foreign corporation, it's that's Kevin's company, right? So he's a Canadian citizen. He also has citizenship, I believe, in Ireland and UAE, but he doesn't have American citizenship. So he's not actually an American citizen, which means that his company is not an American company, right? He's the one that owns it, so it's a foreign company. That data center received at least 200 plus comments just from people in Box Elder County. So these are the locals that live in that community. And they were asked about, their concerns, what questions they had. Some expressed approval, some expressed, they didn't want to have it, and some expressed neutrality. The Salt Lake Tribune ran an analysis of those comments after the commissioners had voted, and I'll get to that vote in just a second. And they found that 68% of Box Elder residents' comments were negative. They didn't want the data center to be approved. About 30% of those comments expressed concerns, but they didn't actually say if they were for or against it. Mostly they were saying, hey, we just want more information. Only 2% of those comments were actually in approval of this project moving forward. Again, this is the community itself speaking. So those comments were collected, and then the commissioners held a meeting. For anybody who was there, I would say it was a little rowdy for sure. Some have described it as zesty, which I think is also appropriate. And the commissioners read like 1 or 2 single positive comments. Again, they collected like 5 positive comments total and used that as a way to justify their approval of this particular project, which they did in a closed room on Zoom, because the people in the audience were pretty vocal about their displeasure with what was happening. Which, again, if you have 98% of the local community expressing concerns and reservations, if not outright disapproval of moving the project forward, it seems like that would be a pretty clear indication that people are unhappy. So they approved that vote. The community immediately sprung into action, which has been phenomenal to see, which includes volunteers that work with our campaign. And others in Utah as well, and pointed out that there was still some things that we can do. This is definitely not the last, this isn't the last word. One of the immediate actions was to go ahead and protest the initial water rights request that this project had put into place. And almost 4,000 Utahns did that. They put in or filed a petition, a complaint against this water rights transfer. And so that water rights transfer was pulled. They went ahead and pulled the original water rights request. That again shows that the community, when united, has the ability to really have an impact even on multinational corporations with billions of dollars in profit that want to come in. Even when our own legislative body and governor aren't listening to the will of the people can still push back against bad governance. A new petition has been filed for water rights, and it looks like the process going forward is to file a bunch of small claims on water rights. So they're trying to do this, kind of a shotgun effect and do one at a time. You can file petitions against those, and if you file that petition via email instead of paying the $15, it doesn't actually cost us anything to do that. And because we have enough time now to know that this project is happening, if you're concerned, you should absolutely go file a petition via email. And at the end of this chat, we'll go ahead and some of the other comments that our campaign has put out on social media, we have links to where you can go and file those petitions. And so that's kind of a big deal right now in the community is this data center project. A couple of things I think that it really highlights that from a campaign perspective, from an individual perspective, I have been most concerned about. First, this is as clear of indication as any that our government genuinely does not right now listen to the people that it's supposed to serve. All of this was pushed through without public comment. When public comment came and said, no, we don't want it, government officials ignored the people they're supposed to serve and did it anyway. And again, this wasn't a close vote. This wasn't like 51% to 49. This was 98% of the local community saying, hey, we at very least have concerns. 2, it shows that people can effectively engage even when their officials don't want to. When we're united and make some noise, we can do something. Mike Schultz has now come out, Governor Cox has now come out and verbally said, yeah, you guys are right. There's probably some current concerns about this particular project. We probably need to go ahead and have some impact studies done. We're requiring the developer to go ahead and give us a full water impact study. We're scaling down the project from a phase 1 to just 1.5 gigawatts of power, which is still like almost half of what the state produces, instead of a 3 point something up to 9. You did that. Like, the community collectively accomplished that because it stood up. 3, I think it also indicates that we have some concerns with corruption within our existing political system. So some very good independent reporting came out. Brian Schott, I think, was the first one that kind of broke this story, that Stuart Adams, again, who helped create MIDA, who sits on the board of MIDA, received over $100,000 in campaign. It was like $135,000 in campaign contributions back when the approval for this hypercenter was first done by the MIDA board. It's more money than his PAC has ever received, and it all came in like 7 different donations in a single day. That's pretty clear evidence of pay to play. This Friday, there's actually a huge energy conference that's taking place. That energy conference has spokesmen coming from several energy companies, and when we look at the people who have benefited in our political system, it's people like Governor Cox, who's gotten hundreds of thousands of donations from the people hosting this conference. It's Mike Schultz, it's Stuart Adams, and it's the Republican House and Senate re-election PACs. And so there's a lot of corporate money that's being funneled into our political system to try and overturn the will of the people. And this is fundamentally, from my perspective, one of the core concerns that I have with the way that our system is currently not working. Corporations and their voices should never supersede the will of the people, ever. Corporations are a human construct. They're there to go ahead and help with economic activities, but their preferences should never be put ahead of families and communities. That's not how our system is supposed to work. So I'll pause there. I think we might have some questions in the chat or some comments. Anything? Nope. Okay. So this is the data center. This has been a huge issue for the last couple of weeks. This is going to be a priority concern for our campaign in the future. Pardon while I take a drink. I have been watching, what Blake Moore has been saying about this particular issue. He's been relatively silent. He's had a couple of comments on the record that I have seen. One which I do agree with, which is he said, public officials should never face death threats. I agree with that. People shouldn't be threatening the commissioners who made this vote. So he and I are in perfect agreement on that one. The other comment less so, which is he said, this project is going to be great for Utah. I don't know that it's going to be great for Utah. Utah doesn't have a geography that's well suited for data center build out and development. We already have 35 of them here. And even with a closed loop water cooling system, we still have really serious concerns about how energy is going to be generated, because it was originally supposed to be a natural gas plant, which if you have a dual steam compressor, which this one was supposed to be using, you need water to go ahead and generate that steam to spin your turbines, in addition to the compression that's happening from burning your natural gas, which leads to air pollution problems. Initial estimates were somewhere between 5 and 7 million additional cars on the road from an air pollution standpoint. There's a report that just came out yesterday or today that showed a data center that had gone into Phoenix, Arizona, had raised the ambient temperature in that community by 4 full degrees. Like these data centers have serious impacts on the communities in which they are built and developed, and I'm not sure that Utah is geographically the best place to go ahead and do this kind of work. And that doesn't even go into any of the other concerns that we might have about data centers in general. I do think it's prudent for all of us to take some time to make better decisions. So I disagree with Governor Cox on that pretty strongly. Like, when you're making a decision that has intergenerational impacts, it's okay to take a little bit of time to see what those consequences are going to be.
What can you do on a federal level to combat the influence money plays in our government?
Yeah, so the question was, what can I do at a federal level to combat the money, the influence that money plays within our political system? The very first thing I think we focus on is overturning bad law, which is Citizens United, which has allowed just complete destruction of our political environment, because it allows for basically unlimited corporate spending and wealthy spending into the political system, which is fundamentally unhealthy. Money should not matter more than people, right? Votes and people and their communities should matter more than money. And our current political system doesn't acknowledge that. It's fundamentally broken. So overturning bad law, I think, certainly helps with that. And then, you have other reforms that you can make. Public servants should be incentivized to serve the public, not to make themselves wealthy. There has been some uptick in conversation about banning individual stock trades from members of Congress for their immediate family, for the judicial branch, for the executive branch, for their immediate families, which I take as a very positive sign. There's actually some legislation that already exists on the House floor right now that just needs some additional votes to get across the finish line. And that would go ahead and put those bans effectively into place, right? That's one thing that we can do to disincentivize public servants from trying to privately enrich themselves off of their position, which is corruption. That's just corruption. Another thing I think we need to go ahead and do is talk about the life cycle of a congressional representative or a government official, where they spend time in an official capacity in government and then they leave that public post and then they end up as a lobbyist, basically immediately after they have left their elected positions. That's bad. Like that allows lobbyists to go ahead and unduly influence representatives and other members of our government by promising them sweetheart packages or sweetheart deals after they leave. So you don't get paid up front, but we're going to promise you a cushy job as soon as you're out of Congress if you're going to go ahead and vote the way that we want you to. So you would go ahead and put a time constriction at the very least, time restriction at the very least on members of Congress and other officials in our federal government that you can't be a lobbyist for, at least 5 years. So if you're going to take a delayed payment, we're going to really make sure that's a delayed payment out in the future. I think the other thing is we should go ahead and look at any PAC organizations, whether those are corporate or otherwise, and if those PACs are oriented around foreign interests and not American interests, then those PACs should have to register as foreign agents, right? Because they are primarily lobbying for foreign interests, and foreign interests and American interests do not always align. Even when we have very close allies, oftentimes those allies would like the United States to engage in activities that are counterproductive to America's own success and well-being. And so we should be very transparent that we want existing organizations within the United States to focus on the interests of American families and American communities.
Okay. The federal workers in Utah have been under constant attack. The OPM director is on record saying that he wants to traumatize federal employees. What will you do for federal employee constituents, and how will you plan to build up what's been broken due to this administration?
Yeah, DOGE has been pretty devastating in general to federal workers. My family, I have federal workers in my direct family. We've seen hundreds of thousands of cuts, including thousands here in our district here in northern Utah. And we have an administration right now that is actively hostile to the work that public servants do. Federal workers are not respected for their work. They're actively encouraged, as was just commented on, to work in a hostile environment so that they will leave. That's the plan. It's to reduce the federal workforce, to make the federal government less effective at helping regular people. I think there's several things that we can do here. One, Congress can go ahead and support and pass legislation that strengthens federal worker unions. We can ensure that executive orders to go ahead and just try and hand wave away worker rights of federal workers is not allowed, and we codify that firmly in law, so that federal workers are protected. So if you do have an executive that comes in and tries to dismantle a federal system that's designed to help Americans, they can't do that, right? There's significant roadblocks to doing that. Two, I don't inherently have a problem if people are going to say, well, we need to work more efficiently and more effectively. That's fine. We can work more efficiently and more effectively. But this goes back to my disagreement with Governor Cox. If you're going to take an agency like the Department of Education that is responsible for ensuring adequate funding and programming for millions of American children, you can't just blow that entity up in a week or a month or two and say it's fine, we'll just let the fallout happen. You have to be, again, thoughtful and focused on how you can make improvements in effectiveness and efficiency within an organization. One thing I would like to note just in general, the federal government is responsible for the single largest budget in the world, right? When we look at the actual budget that Congress passes. And when you look at that budget to the amount of federal workers we actually have who are there to administer the programs and to provide the services that we as Americans have asked for, because that's what federal services are. They're a reflection of the things that we have asked for. It is, if not the most, then one of the most efficient systems that exists in the United States. Walmart has more employees and has less revenue. Amazon has more employees and has less revenue than the federal government and its budget does. Our federal workforce is filled with hardworking people who are dedicated to doing their jobs as public servants. They deserve a Congress and an executive branch that understands that and appreciates that. And we show that appreciation again by protecting their rights, by ensuring that they're adequately funded, and by preventing abuses of somebody that would come in and try and dismantle that system without thoughtfulness.
Okay, so in that same vein, Jaron asks, would you look into having members of Congress not receive paychecks if a government shutdown happens or not get back pay?
Yeah, so my feelings on Congress getting paid during a government shutdown, they shouldn't. Like, Congress really has a set of core responsibilities. Passing the budget is one of those core responsibilities, and if they can't even do that job, then they shouldn't get paid. There's some other things that you can do that can help mitigate the potential for a government shutdown, but at the very least, Congress should not get paid if there's a government shutdown. Any other, sorry, did I answer that question in full? I was, okay. So other things that are going on right now. Let's talk about USAID and the fact that since we're on, government cost reductions and inappropriate and irresponsible cuts to services that were genuinely effective, let's talk about USAID, and let's talk about the World Health Organization, and let's talk about a hantavirus and Ebola medical crisis that's currently impacting nations throughout the world. So USAID has received significant cuts to the point where it's basically non-existent now. And that program was one of the most effective ways for the United States to both demonstrate soft power, which means that we're out in the community building reputation and integrity, while also doing genuine good for both Americans and other people throughout the world. And it was incredibly cost effective. Because we have cut USAID funding, we know that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are going to die as a direct result. And when we look at America's participation in other international organizations like the World Health Organization, the lack of American involvement under this current administration and the fact that our current Congress has refused to go ahead and stand up for this international participation is going to directly lead to additional deaths that were unnecessary. The Ebola crisis specifically that's coming out of the Congo area in Africa is an incredibly virulent strain, right? So there's a mortality rate between 30 to 50%. It's basically a coin flip. If you get it, it's basically a coin flip whether or not you live or die. They were probably several weeks, if not up to 8 weeks behind detecting this particular strain. And part of that is absolutely down to adequate resourcing. Now, we're fortunate as humans that this particular strain of Ebola does not seem to be aerosolized, meaning that we're not spreading contact just by breathing the same air that somebody else does. But it can be spread by contact with a seat that somebody has sat on if, they've coughed on that seat or they've sweat on that seat or something like that. And then you go ahead and, you take and absorb those fluids, which means we have 8 weeks of potential carriers that were traveling without proper quarantine restrictions. If this particular strain of Ebola spreads, and I'm not saying that it will, again, very virulent strain, a lot of people end up dying before they actually can be carriers of the disease. But if it does spread, we can point directly to this administration and this Republican Congress as having some of that responsibility. because they have pulled out support for international aid organizations like the World Health Organization. And that has directly led to less effective responses to these kinds of health crises. We see it here domestically as well, right? We've seen upticks in measles outbreaks. We've seen upticks in other sorts of diseases throughout the United States. Inadequate funding for basic health services is going and has already had a direct negative impact on our population. And this is a direct line back to the budget priorities of this Congress. Sorry, other questions?
Another question. Daniel's asking, Mayor Mamdani just balanced the budget in New York. A big part of that was taxing the rich. The other piece people aren't talking about is looking at overinflated contracts. Will you look to the other overinflated contracts in the military budget?
Yeah, so when we talk about balancing a budget and we talk about overinflated contracts, people who have heard me talk before know that I mentioned Dwight Eisenhower because I genuinely respect him as a Republican president. He was president back in the 50s. He warned about the concerns associated with a military-industrial complex that did not have adequate checks on it. And when we look at the current defense needs of our armed forces, nobody is questioning that American soldiers and service members should have access to the resources they need to be effective in their job. They're putting their life on the line. That's not what anybody is saying. What we can say, though, is that the current contracting structure associated with providing resources to our military members is absolutely bloated. And it's filled with a lot of opportunities for private corporations to live off of taxpayer dollars, perhaps without justification in many situations. Balancing our federal budget at the national level is going to require both increased revenue. So yeah, we need to tax the wealthy. Again, the last time we had this kind of debt ratio was in 1946, where we had more debt than GDP. The way that we got out of that was by increasing taxes on the wealthiest members of society and asking corporations to pay their fair share into our public systems. You have to increase revenue, right? And then you also have to decrease expenses. So by decreasing expenses, we should be focused on the areas where there's the most bloat, the most waste within our existing federal structure. I think looking at contracts associated with our Defense Department are certainly an opportunity for that. The Pentagon hasn't passed a budget review in a long time. I actually don't remember the amount of years off the top of my head, but I can't remember the last time the Pentagon actually passed a budget review. There's obviously opportunities there to improve accountability and to ensure that American tax dollars are being spent in a way that helps the people they're supposed to help the most effectively.
Okay, should the federal government pass laws on data centers? What kinds of laws? Environmental impacts, transparency, accountability laws?
The federal government should absolutely be involved in ensuring that any corporation is adhering to the highest standards of conduct especially where their business intersects with community impact, right? So when we talk about environmental laws, under this administration, we've seen a real cut to environmental enforcement. And Congress should reinforce the necessity of ensuring that corporate activity doesn't harm communities. There was a news report that came out, I believe it was today, where some farmers and ranchers down in Texas were walking their water ditch line, just a regular kind of check-in, and they found millions of gallons of black fluid had been dumped through a pipe that ran to Elon Musk's lithium processing facility that nobody had reported on. Somebody ran that pipe. Somebody was aware that pipe was there. Nobody held that corporation accountable. Nobody ensured that that facility was being held to even the bare standards that are already in place. Should the federal government take active action to prevent data centers from doing that same kind of harm to our communities? I believe that it should. That starts with reinvesting in the existing agencies that allow us to go ahead and monitor and control corporate activity as it impacts communities and the environment. It ensures that those agencies have adequate funding. So Congress passes a budgetary bill that has direct funding for the EPA that the executive branch is now not allowed to touch. This money goes here for this specific purpose. And Congress should go ahead and ensure that data centers don't receive special carve-outs for environmental regulations. They should be held to the same standards as all other businesses, at the very least, right? At the very least, they should not have special carve-outs. We are hearing all sorts of reports about unintended consequences as a result of data center building. There are reports, for example, of a data center, I think this one was in Tennessee, where chicken farmers near the data center are noticing that their chickens are no longer laying eggs because of the frequency of noise that's being generated. Other data centers also in the Tennessee area, because they use diesel generator backups, we have seen a huge uptick in health issues for people that live around them, because all of those fumes are being released into the airs, because the generators they have to run 24/7 in order to make sure that the data center always has emergency backup power. These are real concerns that impact our communities, that the federal government has and should take an active responsibility in mitigating and preventing that damage. Any other, hopefully that addressed the questions in the chat. Okay. Well, we've got about 30 minutes left, so maybe since we're on the topic of data centers, we can go ahead and talk about AI and the awesomeness that is AI.
Maybe the harm, like what as citizens should we be concerned about with AI? And if you're protesting data centers, should you be also protesting AI usage?
Amanda, my wife, is saying, should we be protesting AI in the background?
Well, 100%. But
She has some pretty strong opinions on this. I think, so first, I guess, why should you even listen to me on this particular subject? I think that's valid, right? So I actually teach emergent tech for a program at Utah State University as an adjunct faculty member, though I've taken leave from that program during my congressional run. And emergent tech, if the course I teach focuses on how an emergent tech may or may not disrupt or fundamentally alter or change a system that it's coming into. And for the last couple of years, we've really focused on generative AI. And I think as we talk about AI, it's important to distinguish between the kind of AI that we're talking about. So artificial intelligence, or AI, as we think about it, can be broken into a few different buckets at least. One of those buckets, the one that everybody is currently chasing after right now, is what we call general artificial intelligence. This is the kind of AI that you see in a science fiction movie, right? So this is HAL, or Deep Cut here from Stanley Kubrick, right? This is the ship's computer in Star Trek. This is a droid in Star Wars, right? It's some artificial construct. It's not biologically birthed, so it's made of hardware, circuits, and it has the capacity to think and to reason. We're not going to get into the whole philosophy of like free will, but it has the capacity to be an independent thinker. Nobody has general artificial intelligence, and that's still something I think we would be a little bit a ways off of, right, is general artificial intelligence. So as we look at AI then right now, what we're typically talking then about is generative AI, which is things like ChatGPT and Claude, and AI as a way to think systematically and use machine learning and neural networks to go ahead and process data and to make processes faster and more automated. Sometimes those two things are joined together, right? This generative AI, which is basically predictive text on steroids, and then these machine learning algorithms and these neural networks that are doing pattern recognition. Yeah, question.
Jade, she was asking about your background in AI. You talked a little bit about teaching. Do you have other background in it?
Yeah, so my background in AI is as an instructor of emergent tech and talking to a lot of very, very smart people for years on this particular topic. So I am not a programmer by professional background, right? What I do though is I work with people who have been in this space for a long time, and we have we have the conversations about, all right, so how did we get here? How does this work? Why does it work? What does it need to become more effective, more efficient? What are the potential consequences? How do those consequences overlay with other existing systems? So I myself am not a neural network specialist, right? I am not somebody who programs machine learning algorithms, but I do know enough to go ahead and understand how they function and how they intersect with other things. And I know a lot of really smart people in this space, which is very helpful because when I don't know something, it gives me a chance to be like, hey, like this is a thing I don't know. So how can we go ahead and like, you need to help me understand this thing that I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
Did you finish discussing the other aspects of AI?
No, we have not yet finished discussing, but we can pivot. Like this seems to be a topic that people sometimes ask questions about, but if there's other questions in the chat, I'm always happy to go ahead and respond to them.
There are a couple. Is it possible to pass laws that limit the executive branch and their families on individual stock trading? Do you know if it has been tried, and would it require a 2/3 majority? And somebody else responded with like, they don't even know how they wrap their mind around that question. It's just blatant corruption. What can we do? What will you do? And then they want to know if you're going to the protest at the Capitol on Saturday.
Okay, so corruption questions and then protests at the Capitol. Nobody has tried to ban individual stock trades for the executive branch before because in the past nobody thought that would be a thing that would be necessary. The current administration has been blatantly corrupt. We have reporting out in the last couple of days of Donald Trump's own individual stock trades and how he has made tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars as a direct result of dictating policy that he knows is going to benefit the corporations that he's trading in. Would it require a 2/3? Yeah, probably. Just because you're going to have to go ahead and overturn an executive veto on this. I don't know that Donald Trump is particularly eager to go ahead and stop corruptly making money off of the American taxpayer. I mean, he himself has on both sides of an IRS case right now. His IRS improperly leaked tens of thousands of public, records to the public about IRS filing data, which just happened to include him and his family. But there were tens of thousands of other people impacted. Again, while he was president, it was his IRS that did that. And now he's suing himself for the release of those records, but only he individually is supposed to benefit from a lawsuit that saw the release of tens of thousands of records. Like, obviously, this is not a guy who's interested in not being corrupt. Obviously, this administration and this current Republican-controlled Congress is not really interested in preventing corruption from happening. I mean, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House Johnson, came out and said, woe is the congressmen because they're only paid $175,000 a year. We need to let them trade insider stocks because think of their poor children, right? And I just, at a time when the median wage in the United States isn't even half of that. I mean, it's not even a third of that.
Depending on your race.
Yeah, right? The audacity to come out and say we should allow blatant corruption among our public servants is just mind-boggling to me. So yeah, will we need like a 2/3 vote? I'm sure that we will, which is all the more reason to ensure that we are electing people who are dedicated to ensuring that the system itself gets fixed. This is actually a bit of a tangent, so I guess I'll go off on a bit of a tangent on this right now. I don't worry if people are angry. I don't worry if people are happy with current policy. I worry when people are apathetic. And I worry when people think that we as individual citizens can't actually change the system that we are in. We built this system. We turned it into what it looks like today, and we can fix it. It's not some thing that has been placed here that's immutable and unchangeable. We built it, we broke it, we can fix it. And that requires all of us to step up and do the right thing. One of the things that I get deeply frustrated about is sometimes people just express a general apathy, like, well, nothing can ever get better. Nothing will ever get better unless we as Americans step up and make it better. It's our system, it's our country, it's our government, it's our economy. If we don't do the work of fixing it, nobody will. But it can be fixed, and it will be fixed if we go ahead and step up and into these spaces and do what we need to do. And so on this corruption piece, yeah, it's going to take a 2/3 vote. So elect people to get that 2/3 vote in place. If that's what we need to do, then that's what we will do to fix it. Does that mean it's easy? No. Does that mean it's necessary? Yes. And it's on us to make sure that this happens. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that this happens. Sorry. End of rant.
And I think Utah is showing, I think we're seeing right now the effects of citizens stepping up and pushing back on a system. Locally, we just need that to happen.
Yeah.
Federally, bipartisan. Okay, so somebody asked, Idaho and Texas have women who are dying because they can't get an abortion with their total abortion ban. Carrie Ann Lisenby, who is running against Blake Moore, helped pass the trigger law in Utah to ban almost all abortion. What are your views on abortion? Abortion is health care. This is not a black and white issue, and I feel it is about control and not about pro-life.
Fair question. Yeah. So Angie, thank you for the question. And Amanda, my wife, is reading these questions to me. Carrie Ann Lisenby is an interesting sort. I believe we've got her on the record saying that if women will just control their sperm intake, they wouldn't have to worry about it, which is just an unbelievably callous and crass thing for anybody to say. Abortion is healthcare. So my position on this, I'll be very clear. Healthcare decisions should always be between the individual and their physician. And if they're religious, then they're God. That's all healthcare decisions. If a man walks into a doctor's office and says, hey, I need a pill because I'm not able to go ahead and enjoy my reproductive life as much as I would like to, that man and that his conversation should be between him and his physician. If a woman walks into a doctor and says, I need reproductive care for whatever reason, right? That's a conversation between her and her physician. As a legislator, I get deeply concerned when we start infringing on individual rights. I get deeply concerned when I, as a legislator, think that I know enough about an issue to mandate what individuals should and should not have access to, in contravention to the words and knowledge of people that live in that space, or that work in that space, that are experts in that space. Angie is right when she calls out Texas and Idaho as having increased mortality rates for women as a direct result of not having access to health care. It's not just Texas and Idaho. We have stories that have come across the United States where states have enacted health care bans. And that's what an abortion ban is. It's a health care ban. When they have enacted health care bans, we have seen women die as a direct result. This is not hyperbole. It is causing significant blowback for women. And it's also causing significant issues for broader healthcare communities. Idaho now has a shortage of trained gynecologists because those physicians do not want to practice in that state because they're not sure if they provide medical care to women in need, whether or not they themselves will lose their license and face prison time, right? There are some laws on the books that say if a medical provider provides medical care to a woman in need, then that provider could be drawn up for murder charges, right? This is absolutely a situation where women are being directly targeted and they are not being given access to basic health care that they need. And I get it that I'm a guy and I know that I don't fully understand the situation. I have been married for 20 years. We have 3 daughters. They're all teenagers now. My wife and I...
How my husband feels when I get medical procedures done.
Yeah. I have sat in the room where a doctor will look at me and say, like, well, how do you feel about your wife getting this medical procedure? I'm like, I don't know, ask her. She's the one that needs it. We have had miscarriages in our family on multiple occasions. We know people that have had significant healthcare crises associated with their reproductive health. This is a situation that really does directly point at whenever the government thinks it can control individual rights and supersede the knowledge of experts, we inevitably harm people, and that makes me deeply concerned. So no, abortion from my perspective, healthcare is a decision between the individual and their medical provider. Full stop. Yeah, sorry, another question.
So what laws can you pass to lessen abortion without infringing on the rights of women?
It's a really good question. What can we do to reduce abortion without telling women that they just can't make choices? If we want to reduce abortion, we improve the economic and educational outcomes of people in all of our communities. That's how you reduce abortion rates. If you want to know how to have more families in a community with more healthy children and people who are excited to have those children and welcome them into their homes, you make sure that they have access to stable employment. You make sure that they have access to a safe and secure home, that they have access to healthcare, that they have access to education, that they have access to the basic things that they need, not just to survive, but to thrive. Right? As a government, if you want to decrease abortions, then you increase the overall health and welfare of your communities. You invest in them. You invest in their economic well-being, and you invest in their education outcomes, because education has a direct line to improved economic success. That's how you have fewer abortions. When people feel that they have hope, they're more likely to want to bring children into the world. When they look forward and they see something worth having a life to build towards, that's when you have more kids in your community. This extends to environmental concerns as well, right? This extends to ensuring that the generations that live today and our kids and our grandkids aren't inheriting a world that has been fundamentally destroyed by corporate greed. We have got to shift this conversation and say, listen, we're past the inflection point, because we have to take significant direct action that ensures that our world is a place worth living in, not just for us, but our kids and our grandkids. We cannot keep sacrificing their future so that some corporate stock can go up. That's not how you ensure that we have a better life for everybody. We want fewer abortions in this country, which I think is an admirable goal to work towards. Then we should have more services and more security in place for everyday people and their families and their communities. That's how you lower an abortion rate. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm happy, I guess, to go back on an AI tangent, I suppose, although that might not be necessary at this particular time. Sorry, my wife's over here dropping things left and right. I apologize. It's been a long day of talking. My tongue is not as dexterous as sometimes it usually is. In the last 10 minutes, I guess we should talk about the protest. Oh yeah, because that was a question that came up that I haven't directly answered. We will be at the protest on Saturday, down in Salt Lake City. And then there's another protest that is scheduled next week, I believe, up here in Cache Valley as well. The protest that is happening, and I said this before, you'll probably hear me say it a lot going forward, but these kinds of protests are a direct reflection of Americans standing up and participating in their democracy. I advocate always for peaceful protest. I advocate always for citizens participating actively by going to town halls, by going to commissioner meetings, by going to zoning meetings, right? Going and sitting in the room, making sure that you are there when these conversations are happening, so that we are holding our public servants, because they are our public servants, accountable for the decisions that they make. A representative government only works if the citizens expect to be represented. It doesn't work if we just sit by the sidelines and let people do whatever they want. That's how the system got broke in the first place. It's why we have the problems that we do with corruption and corporate overreach right now in the United States. We broke it. We got to fix it. So we will definitely be at that protest. If you haven't, or if you're from the Cache Valley area for sure, Patrick Belmont, who's also running for a local House seat up here in Cache Valley. He's been highlighted a couple of times in conversations around this data center. He's a brilliant individual. He focuses on environmental science issues.
There's an article in the Rolling Stone.
Yeah, he's got an article that came out in the Rolling Stone. He's been interviewed by KSL and others. He'll be one of the speakers at this protest, and it's definitely worth showing up and hearing what he has to say, because if you want somebody who's knowledgeable about this issue in and out on the scientific details of it and the impacts to the environment that a data center can have, Patrick Belmont is your guy. So genuinely, I would encourage everyone to show up. If you have concerns, like even if you want to see a data center built, you should show up so that you can tell the public officials that we have that it's fine if we want to build these, but these should only be built after the public has had a chance to weigh in, and only after we understand what the impact of these centers is going to be on our communities. We shouldn't be rushing this process. So definitely we will be there, and we would encourage everybody else to be there as well.
Will you have, but we're not tabling or anything, you'll just be there.
Yeah, so we won't have a table. We're trying to make sure to support this is a general community event. This isn't about any one political candidate, even though we've been pretty heavily involved in this, and a lot of our volunteers have as well. Shout out to Jaden, for example. She's been phenomenal in this space. So people should definitely show up, but we'll have volunteers and shirts, and I will definitely be down. Yeah, sorry, another question?
Christy Grusendorf asked, sorry, she came in late, but we haven't addressed this. What are your thoughts on the pardoned January 6th criminals now getting reparations? January 6th is
The January 6th criminals getting reparations. Well, they haven't gotten them yet, so we'll say that. There's some congressional pushback against this proposed deal of $1.8 billion. It's 1.776, but it's such an asinine thing. Sorry. I don't know if Facebook's going to flag me on that. That probably gives you an idea of how I feel about the reparations. Reparations for what? Trying to destroy the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in American history. I mean, even during the Civil War, we didn't have a bunch of people show up at the Capitol building and try and prevent Abraham Lincoln from taking his oath of office, or having Congress certify the results of the election, which is what happened on January 6th. January 6th is the event that fundamentally broke any connection that I had to the Republican Party, because it was very clearly individuals that were violating that peaceful transfer of power. And they came prepared to do real harm. They weren't just sightseeing, all right? DC police officers died. People that showed up there came masked with zip ties and hoods to take out elected officials. They had built a gallows to go ahead and hang Vice President Pence.
They had put bags of bricks on the streets the day before.
They had put bags of bricks out on the streets ahead of time. This was a thought out, planned. It was treasonous. It was treasonous. And the fact that they are now being even considered to receive some kind of financial compensation, this is what it looks like when authoritarianism starts to overtake democratic institutions in a country built on the rule of law. Because you have a president that is signaling to his supporters, because Donald Trump, we know that he was behind this because we have all of the files that were never allowed to go ahead through the legal system. And they're like, yeah, dude definitely knew that this was going on. He is telling his supporters, I will pay you when you show up. When you show up to destroy democracy, you're going to get a paycheck from me. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, this is absolutely an authoritarian dictator saying, I will support people who are actively trying to destroy democratic institutions if you do it in my name.
No consequences for that.
So I don't have a lot of positive feelings about this particular issue. Sorry. We are almost at the end of our virtual town hall. I do appreciate everybody who has come and showed up tonight. I am happy to answer any other questions that folks might have. But if we don't have any, our daughters actually just rolled in, and I haven't had a chance to hang out with them at all today. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing them for a couple of minutes tonight.
I mean, but you can also just ask questions for a few more minutes.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got 5 minutes on the clock. So if anybody else has another question, I'm always happy to answer them. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up just a couple minutes early. If you would like to be at the protest on Saturday, please come say hi. We will be there peacefully protesting. If you would like to go ahead and get involved in the campaign, we would love it if you visit our website. We have over 200 volunteers. We would love to have a couple more. Oh, my wife just raised her hand. It looks like we might have another question.
Jaden just asked what if the January, I think there might be a delay, but what if the January 6th events happen again?
What if they happen again?
She says she's anxious about it, even with it being several years old.
Yeah. What if they happen again? If this happens again, we will do what we have always done as Americans. We will stand up for the rule of law. That's what we will do. We will stand up for the rule of law. And we will ensure that we have elected people who are going to put the rule of law first, that hold to their oath to the Constitution, and that are not interested in anybody else's special interests, that will act with integrity when they are in office. That's what we're going to do if this happens again. And I think it's incredibly important that in this 2026 election cycle that we elect the representatives that we know who will stand up for the Constitution and for the rule of law. Because this upcoming Congress is the one that will certify the next, these are the people that we need to go ahead and ensure that they're in office.
So 2 things. One, somebody, Christy said thank you, Peter.
Oh.
Somebody said shout out to Lindsay.
Yeah, Lindsay's awesome.
Derek Hodson.
Hey, Derek!
Who we know from many years back, or Peter does. I think I went to a wedding. What are the duties you are looking for volunteers to fulfill?
What do we want volunteers to do? So I'll just give you the brief rundown. We're asking volunteers to give up 2 to 5 hours every week between now and November. We're not asking for more than that because we know that everybody has a life outside of this. We're asking for 2 to 5 hours a week. Our volunteers are primarily responsible for our community outreach efforts. And so this means our volunteers are knocking on doors. They are making phone calls. They're showing up at events. They're going to be at places like this protest on Saturday, wearing shirts that our campaign is providing. They're actively being in the community and listening and trying to understand the issues that their neighbors have so that we, from a campaign, and I, as a candidate, can focus my policy on how best to help the people here in northern Utah. I can't be everywhere. I try. I drive a lot. We put a lot of miles on the car, and we have a lot of in-person events, but I can't be everywhere. There's 900,000 people that live in northern Utah. And so we are depending on our volunteers to be out in the community and talking with people and listening to them so that we can understand how best to serve the people here in Cache and in Davis and in Box Elder and in Weber and in Rich counties.
So Angie asks, so her comment is, I feel the voters in Utah are blindly following Trump and Mike Lee. How can we get voters to see past non-Republican, because Republicans won't stand up against Trump?
Angie, this is a great question. We only have a minute or 2 left before, because this is scheduled for an hour and Facebook cuts us off, typically at the hour mark. The best thing we can do is we can talk to people one-to-one, person-to-person. We have lost a lot in the last several years in direct engagement with our friends and our neighbors and people in our community. And we see a lot of crap on social media. There's television ads, there's radio ads. More important than anything else is a person-to-person conversation, and one where we're not judging anybody, because we're all in this together, and we're honestly asking, how can we help? And then helping that person see that there's a better way forward. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or independent or anything else. We are here to help every Utahn in northern Utah. We are here to help everybody in CD2 have better opportunities and better outcomes than the ones that we experience right now under Blake Moore. And I think a lot of people in Utah realize that. They realize that we have a trail of broken promises. And while, Mike Lee's not up for re-election and Trump's not up for re-election this year, their administration and their time in Congress is certainly causing the harm that we are seeing. And we just have to be honest about that. Those are honest, direct conversations. We're not being rude, we're not picking fights, but we need to have those honest conversations with our friends and neighbors. My wife is saying she really loves Pete Buttigieg,
well,
which I do too.
A statement came out today about this, about how you have these conversations with people.
I think Pete is a great example of somebody who's willing to just engage and to talk with everybody, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans, we're all Utahns. The economic situation hits all of us, right? Unless you're a multimillionaire like Blake Moore, and then you're a little bit insulated. Okay, well, we are at time. So again, I just want to say thank you to everybody who came. We've got this recorded. We'll try and get it posted up on YouTube and some other places for the campaign. If we missed you at this virtual one and you're just catching this after the fact, we'd love to see you at one of our in-person town halls. Always happy to answer questions as best we can. You guys have a wonderful night.
And you're going to post the links for the water
yeah, so links for the water protest will be posted on our social media accounts over the next couple of days. All right, see you guys later.